Welcome back to Project Methania. In the last episode, we explored how first terrestrial organisms continue to adapt to harsh conditions of land, developing more complex behaviors and distinct ways of locomotion. We also saw how rapid colonization and diversification of the first terrestrial plants led to rising levels of atmospheric hydrogen, causing a drop in global temperatures, ultimately lowering sea levels and, along with geological activity, revealing new landmasses. In today's episode, we are going to observe how species of Methania adapt to life on these newly formed islands, developing unique adaptations and creating new ecosystems. So, let's start. To begin, let's explore how islands form. Broadly speaking, all islands can be divided into two categories: islands that separate from the mainland, rather through geological activity, or through rise of sea level, and islands that are formed independently of any mainland, usually through volcanic activity, coral growth, or sediment deposition. Our first island would be Ib. This tiny island is located near the east coast of Rimara, and was initially formed as an extension of land during a period of sea level drop, which over the course of several millions of years separated and drifted away from Rimara, still carrying species that live on the mainland. First of all, it's important to note that this small island would only provide a limited supply of nutrients compared to the mainland, that is thousands of times bigger and therefore has a greater area for plants and animals to live. This means that local fauna will have to adapt to it. One of the most common evolutionary trends for island-dwelling animals is described by Foster's rule, which says that members of species get smaller or bigger depending on the resources available in the environment. While this rule can be applied to many isolated habitats, it is mostly associated with isolated islands, and so it is sometimes called the island rule. One of the most famous examples of this phenomenon is species of now extinct Channel Islands mammoth that descended from the much bigger Colombian mammoth during the late Pleistocene. Similarly to them, palambulators that live on Ib will get significantly smaller, only reaching a third of size that of their continental counterparts. And in addition, they might also change their feeding strategies to better suit their new diet. You see, when this island separated from the mainland, its smaller area could no longer sustain a large freshwater system, which led to increased salinity. Although this had a slightly negative effect on marine plants, especially Hydrothermal Soup, which serve as the main food source of palambulators, at the same time it attracted salt-loving mervithawks that quickly established a large population on Ib. Palambulators already fed on marine plants by scooping up large clumps of vegetation with each feeding motion. And while it worked with Hydrothermal Soup, these newly arrived mervithawks would be significantly smaller, and feeding on them would require special evolutionary adaptation. An adaptation that independently emerged among several clades of birds, such as flamingos, as well as in some clades of pterosaurs, is the presence of hairy structures near the mouth, called lamella, that work similarly to baleen, that allows whales to filter water for krill. These Ib-dwelling palambulators would develop a similar structure as an efficient way of filtering out the small mervithawks from the water, while still allowing them to consume any remaining fragments of Hydrothermal Soup. Another trend that can be observed on islands is lower population density. In the case of these palambulators, which we will call pectambulators, it might result in their communicatory tentacles and wing flaps becoming smaller and less vibrant, as they shift more towards solitary lifestyle. But they won't be the only ones to end up on Ib. Alongside with several pentacrab species, a small group of carnivorous captarambulators would be present as well. Following the Foster's rule, they will also get much smaller, and with a reduced size and lower population density, they will be forced to find a new hunting strategy. While their ancestors preyed in packs, mostly relying on a number of individuals to take down prey bigger than them, these species will need to develop a strategy that can be performed by one singular individual. An optimal solution will be so-called bite-and-track strategy that can be observed among many reptiles. This strategy involves delivering a single, often venomous bite to their prey and then retreating, allowing time to weaken or kill the prey from blood loss, infection, or the effects of venom. A famous example for an animal using this strategy would be Komodo dragons. Although for a long time it was believed that their saliva contained bacteria, which led to the infectious effect of their bite, it was proven wrong by a 2013 study that revealed that it in fact was caused by toxins that stopped blood from clothing, and thereby increasing the chance of infection. Like these lizards, capturambulators on IP might also develop toxic glands that would produce venom capable of stopping blood from clothing. To ensure the venom delivery, their jaws will become more flexible, allowing them to open wider and strike more effectively. Additionally to that, their tails, formerly used for communication, might transform into form more resembling leaves of local plants, for better ambushing. This group of small venomous ambulators will be called capturambulator ipesses, to highlight their uniqueness to IP. While many islands like IP would separate from the mainland, thereby already having flora and fauna from the start, a lot of islands would originate through the change of the sea level, and will initially be devoid of any species except for microbial life. So in case for these isolated islands to build a stable ecosystem, plants will need to find a way to disperse there first. While most plants might rely on strong winds to carry their larvae to the nearby islands, a group of coastal Sabulentacula would instead specialize in oversea dispersal, allowing their larvae to reach islands far beyond the mainland. At first, they may evolve to provide their larvae with increased storage for fats and sugars, extending the time they can remain in their larval form. However, beyond a certain point, the added weight would become inefficient, making prolonged flight impractical. Rather than maintaining flight capability, their larvae could instead lose their hydrogen-filled leaves entirely, retaining only a small, buoyant chamber, just large enough to keep their central mass afloat. Additionally, this larva might develop a tough shell that will help them in retaining water during low tides and while being in high salinity waters. These larvae would somewhat resemble the drift fruits of coconut palms and looking glass trees, enabling these plants to disperse their larvae across vast oceanic distances, sometimes drifting for months before reaching new shores. For Nautacolumn, it will also mean that once they arrive to new islands, they will experience no competition from other plants, diversifying into multiple different species. Around the same time, a group of Grammathosa might develop a completely new method of dispersal that Methania has never seen before. While most plants of Methania would rely on their actively moving larvae to disperse, or simply reproducing through vegetative reproduction, this group might start relying on animals to transport their larvae. This adaptation might start as a random mutation of epidermal cells that would lead to development of a sticky mucus layer on their leaves. This would allow these early Gluthithosa to stick to big animals, thereby benefiting from both passive dispersal as well as nutrients release when the host eventually dies, should the larva remain attached long enough. Over time, this larva might start targeting specific hosts that would allow them to travel for as long as possible, thereby increasing their dispersal area. The best candidates for that will be Hailecrista, with them already traveling long distances in search of carcasses. To attract them, Gluthithosa might start producing a slightly intoxicating substance, specifically targeted on Hailecrista. When rubbed against their skin, it would cause mild euphoric effect, encouraging the Hailecrista to visit Gluthithosa and rub against them, thereby allowing their larvae to stick to their skin. To attract their symbiotic partners, many plants on Earth independently evolved brightly colored flowers, making their reproductive structures more noticeable, and similarly to them, this Gluthithosa species might also develop a colorful structure, similar in function, at the top of their leaves. While at first this intoxicating symbiosis between Gluthithosa and Hailecrista works well, as these plants spread more widely, the increased concentration of neuroactive compounds could pose a significant threat to Hailecrista, potentially leading to complete disorientation, neurological damage, and expression of unnatural behaviors, leading to strongly decreased survival chances. To solve this issue, several Gluthithosa subspecies would evolve a cyclic toxin production, with blooming periods distributed throughout the entire year, potentially lowering the average toxin concentration in the ecosystem. These two groups of plants will serve as the pioneer species that will colonize many distant islands, and thereby will pave the way for the first animal species to establish their habitats far from the mainland. The second island that we will observe is Tivana. Unlike Ip, Tivana won't form through the separation from Rimara. Instead, Tivana will emerge due to volcanic activity. Far off the east coast of Rimara, a hotspot will form. As the oceanic plates move over this stationary hotspot, magma will break through the crust, forming undersea volcanoes. Over time, repeated eruptions will build up layers of solidified lava, and with the drop of sea level, a chain of islands will be created. By the time Tivana emerges and the first plants begin to colonize it, most animals will be tied to their mainland habitats, unable to reach this newly formed island. Even flying creatures that might seem like natural pioneers will not be among the first to arrive on Tivana, as it will lack any prey to sustain them, and beyond a place to rest or serve as a mating ground, it will hold no appeal. Luckily, for a very small group of species, there will be an alternative way to get on distant islands. During one severe weather event, such as flood or storm, some vegetation might be torn from the ground and sent floating to the nearest river, forming natural rafts composed of uprooted trees, tangled leaves, and other plant matter. Small animals, unfortunate enough to seek shelter on trees, might be carried to the open ocean along with these rafts, introducing them to isolated islands. This phenomenon is known as rafting event, a rare but significant process in which animals are transported across bodies of water on floating vegetation. While often accidental and dangerous, rafting events have played a crucial role in shaping ecosystems by introducing new species to isolated islands. One of the most famous examples of rafting event comes from the Caribbean, where scientists believe that the first ancestors of modern monkeys in South America originally came from Africa by using floating vegetation millions of years ago. Similarly to them, a group of small arboreal ascendipenta might travel to Tivana by using a fallen tree and later establish a population on this chain of islands. Like their ancestors, they would feed on larvae of trees, but with Nautacolosa's larvae having tougher shell, they will eventually develop mouth appendages that will be better at cracking them. Let's call this group Nautapenta. One significant process that these pentacrabs will undergo is rapid diversification due to numerous open niches on Tivana. Similarly to how Darwin's finches diversified into several different species on Galapagos Islands through a process of adaptive radiation. Our first group, called Magnipenta, might evolve to feed more on low-growing grasses, developing limbs better suited for terrestrial locomotion, mouth parts better capable of handling leaves, as well as a digestive system better capable of digesting plant matter. With these adaptations and a complete lack of predators, they will eventually experience effects of insular gigantism and become much bigger compared to their mainland counterparts, making them the biggest pentacrab species so far. Another group might eventually evolve more towards carnivory, developing stronger and bigger mandibles that might resemble serrated teeth by having saw-like appearance, allowing them to penetrate the thick shell of Magnipenta and cause severe bleedings. While not growing as big as Magnipenta, these teeth and their ambushing hunting strategy will allow these new pentacrabs that we will call Dentapenta to become the apex predators of Tivana. While these pentacrabs will be the first species to arrive and radiate on this chain of islands, other species may still reach it through rafting events. Another species that will also be very likely to be taken to the sea will be Aerogastors. More specifically, their Xylophagus larvae that could one day get trapped inside of a fruit of Nautophosa, travel to Tivana, and eventually establish a stable population. Taking into account that Tivana won't yet have any predators to control their population and their high reproductive rate, their population might get out of control really fast. So much so that finding an uninfested tree to give birth will become almost impossible. With this limitation of food and lack of population control, some Aerogastors might take the initiative. In many clades on Earth, larvae might engage in cannibalistic behaviors if put in an overcrowded or stressful environment, as a way to reduce competition and provide themselves with extra nutrients. In this scenario, both for species on Earth and Aerogastors on Tivana, larvae will have much higher chances of survival if they have adaptations allowing them to effectively feed on other larvae and not be eaten themselves. This way, larvae of Aerogastors might start developing eyes much earlier in their life, having stronger mouth parts and being longer overall, often reaching up to 20 centimeters and continuously growing throughout their life. Over time, some of these larvae might eventually undergo neoteny, bypassing metamorphosis entirely, and remaining in their larval form throughout their entire life, forming a new group called Vermicolumn. Now, without flying life stage, it will get significantly more challenging for them to disperse to different trees and reproduce. To solve this problem, they might develop a way of locomotion resembling that of caterpillars, bending their body in series of vertical waves, and lifting the segments of their body to push themselves forward, using their back flaps inherited from their adult form as support. In addition to that, a stiff, rod-like structure along their back might develop to provide needed support, making it easier for them to move and bend in various ways. This rod might eventually get separated into several segments composed of chitin, somewhat resembling the vertebrae of early jawless fish. Although with these adaptations population density will get lower, it might still stay just high enough to force some Vermicolumn to adapt for a different lifestyle. When most of the trees on land are occupied, some individuals that are weaker and are either unable to find a sustainable tree or too vulnerable to defend one, may eventually resort to feeding on fallen trees in the water instead. Over time, a small group of Vermicolumn might adapt to occupy the nearby shores of Tivana and start feeding exclusively on sunken wood and roots of marine plants. Their spine could become even more flexible, and specialized back flaps will allow them to engage in dorsoventral oscillation, a swimming motion similar to that of modern aquatic mammals. To optimize their adaptation to a water-dwelling lifestyle, their mandibles would become more streamlined, and their front limbs, formerly used for climbing trees, would evolve into fin-like structures. Eventually, their nostrils might shift upwards, forming a dorsal fin and allowing them to breathe while keeping most of their body submerged. With these adaptations, more or less generalist diet, and free access to the waters of Methania, this newly formed group, called Nautacolumn, will eventually spread across the globe, primarily occupying lakes and rivers on the mainland, while also establishing populations in the open sea. In response to the arrival of Nautacolumn to their ecosystems, many predators might start to specialize in hunting them. For example, tentaclomorphs that primarily preyed on pentacrabs might specialize their lower mouth parts for burrowing and sifting through sand, allowing them to capture Nautacolumn as they burrow to feed on roots. To do so, they will develop a baleen-like structure, similar to that of now extinct Amplectobulua, a distant relative of Anemalocaris. Although Nautacolumn would still keep the toxins-producing glands from their ancestors, these toxins might be less effective to these tentaclomorphs, giving them a window to develop enzymes capable of ignoring these toxins entirely. In addition to that, their method of swimming could shift more towards increased maneuverability, as their new feeding strategy doesn't require high speeds. Their eye stalks would eventually grow longer, enhancing their field of view, allowing them to detect movements in their surroundings more easily while sifting through the sand. Let's call this group Sabulentaculum. While this group would occupy large bodies of water like coastlines, a group of Hailecrista called Hailecrista might start occupying smaller and more enclosed bodies of water like lakes and rivers, and prey on Nautacolumn by engaging in hunting strategy known as plunge diving, in which they dive into the water, catching their prey and then emerge shortly after that. To minimize the impact while diving and increase their precision, they will become much smaller, making them the smallest actively flying creature on Methania. While underwater, they would rely on their wings to change the direction of their movement, which would lead to partial separation of their wing membranes into 3 different sections that would be able to move somewhat independently from each other. In addition, as it can be seen in many piscivorous birds on Earth, their beak will elongate, decreasing drag while diving even more, and their wing muscles, responsible for the locomotion, will become more robust. To avoid getting poisoned by the toxins of Nautacolumn, they will start to engage in selective ingestion, avoiding the consumption of toxic glands, and since their size will be closer to that of their prey, it would be much easier for them to maneuver around their internal organs, ensuring they consume only the safe, nutrient-rich portions while avoiding the toxic glands located along the spine of Nautacolumn. Furthermore, their beaks might also be well suited to engage in precision grip, allowing them to carefully manipulate smaller objects while extracting nutrients. Eventually, this physiological and behavioral adaptation will lead to them spreading to the open seas of Methania, as well as developing a nesting behavior, allowing them to build small structures made of organic matter and rocks, where they'd be able to butcher their prey and keep their young safe from predators. In response to that, many plant clades on Methania might start developing structures that can be used for nest building, allowing Hailecrista to build better nests, and these plants to spread their larvae at greater range. This relationship is often called nest facilitation mutualism, and can be seen in many plants and mosses such as Spanish moss and cotton. Although a lot of clades will develop this sort of relationship, one clade of short Grammathosa, called Lanugothosa, will develop a bond so close that they won't be able to spread without relying on Hailecrista. While they might still keep some big leaves for methanosynthesis, Most of the larvae would come in form of a pod, which would resemble a dense, fibrous mass covered with a sticky, glue-like fluid. One of the best places to build a nest for Hailecrista could be small isolated cliff islands, where they'd be protected from predators and have access to several hunting grounds nearby. This will eventually allow them to spread across the whole ocean and eventually discover the biggest and most remote island of Methania, Isu. Although it may seem impossible for a landmass of this size to emerge due to changes in sea level, there are several examples on Earth of large islands and land bridges that existed during the last glacial maximum. Some of the most noteworthy examples include Doggerland, which connected the British Isles to northern Europe, and the Bering Land Bridge, which connected Siberia and Alaska. Isu could start as a submerged landmass that separated from the main continent long before life emerged, which was later shaped by volcanic activity and eventually slowly emerged once the sea level started to drop. Unlike other islands, Isu, by being both bigger and having a mountain range, would be able to support a humid forest on the south and have a more dry savanna on the northern part. An island located so far from the continent will only be reachable by the smallest species capable of rafting, so naturally there'd be no megafauna at first. Similarly to Tivana, one of the first arrivals would be Nautacolumn and larvae of Aerogastors infesting them. Upon arrival, they'd be met with an almost unlimited source of food and complete lack of predators or competition for the food sources. In an environment like this, they would experience the effects of insular gigantism, growing bigger and developing into a group called Aerogastors. Becoming bigger will mean that they will no longer be able to rely on their hydrogen-filled sacs to float, and will evolve to use their long legs for arboreal locomotion, similar to that of apes. Their bones will get more solid, and their back flaps much smaller, as they won't be used to maneuver while floating anymore. In addition to that, their diet could change as well, moving more towards omnivory as they start feeding on carrion and rare Aerogastors they'd be able to catch. While these Aerogastors would primarily occupy a niche of omnivorous predators in the southern forests, another group of Aerogastors might adapt to live in drier savannas, tending more towards terrestrial lifestyle. The first thing that they will need to change is the form of their locomotion. Because savannas, unlike lush forests they originated from, would only be able to support extremely small patches of trees with a great distance between each other, these Aerogastors would lose most of their air sac capacity, developing a phylogenetic constraint, a structure or an organ that is inherited from ancestors and persists in an organism despite being suboptimal due to evolutionary history. Along with air sacs, their back flaps and proboscis-like tubes near their mouth, used for getting hydrogen from plants, will become much shorter, serving more as a fitness display than anything else. Despite adapting to a more terrestrial lifestyle, these savanna-dwelling Terragastors will retain their long legs and may even further elongate their necks and mouth tentacles, allowing them to reach for the leaves of rarely growing trees. For even better locomotion, their legs will become more muscular, and their lower part would form nearly circular feet with a cushion-like pad that would work as a shock absorber, reducing impact while walking and thereby allowing them to travel greater distances without getting tired. To support their bigger body size, they will need to find more ways to gain nutrients. The most obvious choice for them would be larvae of Nautacolumn, as it already grows on trees they use as their primary food source. To access the soft and nutrient-rich part, they might develop a ring of teeth capable of crushing their shells, somewhat resembling the radula of snails. With this completely new lifestyle, their way of reproduction could change as well. Similarly to most members of Testudines aculeati, they could start carrying their young inside of their body until they reached the level of maturity at which they'd be capable of supporting themselves without needing to undergo further metamorphosis as a part of their life cycle. This adaptation might eventually start being supported by parental investment strategy, as Isu gets more dangerous. After several millions of years of relatively peaceful life, some Hailecrista would eventually establish a stable population in Isu. While at first their prey would be Nautacolumn, soon one clade could develop a lifestyle that is less water-bounded and start hunting on bigger prey. In many cases on Earth, once flying creatures migrate to a big, isolated area, they often start to lose their flying abilities in favor of more effective terrestrial locomotion, as they start exploring more ground-bounded niches. In the case of Hailecrista, They might start hunting flying Aerogastors and then slowly switch to young Terragastors. Eventually, this might lead to them developing much bigger body size, being rarely able to hunt fully grown Terragastors. To support locomotion at this size, their legs will develop more erect posture and their wings might get shorter to not disturb them while running. Although losing them completely will provide them with more effective mobility, keeping their wings at this length will also allow them to hunt on flying species such as Hailecrista and Aerogastors at their earlier life stages. Let's call this group Terracrista. And the last and the most northern island, called Friff, let's keep it for the next episode, in which we are going to see how life on Methania adapts to live in colder regions and further explore the climate on this methane-rich planet. Thank you all for watching. If you want to see more, make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, a big thank you to all artists who submitted their artworks for this episode, making it look significantly better. If you want to submit your artwork for the next episode, or stay updated, feel free to join our Discord server as well. And remember, never stop exploring.